Visit New York City's first museum. Open Tuesday through Sunday. A museum for everyone with pay-as-you-wish Friday evenings. Explore. Experience. And interact with art, history, and so much more. Discover something new at New York Historical Society.
So welcome to the 3 pillars of civic engagement. My name is Tara Pehush, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of New York City. I'm stepping in for my colleague, Diane Burrows, this evening because of an emergency. So I'm happy to see you all here tonight and to be with you to talk about how to engage in our communities. The League of Women Voters of the City of New York is a nonpartisan organization whose purpose is to promote informed and active citizens participating in government. Our mission is to expand our outreach and increase all New Yorkers' participation in local communities and government through civics education, voting, and advocacy. Next slide, please. We are here today to share with you some ideas of how to civically engage and participate in order to influence and affect change, especially locally here in New York City. This presentation is an overview of 3 important and accessible ways people can influence their communities. These 3 pillars, which are listed on the slide, is voting, lobby and advocacy, and community involvement. We will also bring you up to date on some of the newest election laws that will affect this year's voting and that the League worked very hard to pass. Next slide, please. So where does our power come from? In our democracy, we have 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The power of the government is granted by the people. It is the people who give power to the leaders through the election process. Now, we the people, as you can see on the screen there, are the first 3 words of the Constitution. Consider those first 3 words, which were written in 1787. Who were the people? Did all of us on this Zoom today qualify to be considered we the people in 1787? Well, unfortunately not. No women, no Black person, no white person who did not own property, and yet here we are today. Women, people of color, immigrants, members of many diverse communities have power now. Was the power simply handed to us by those in charge? No way. We had to battle and fight for every single right we have now. Suffrage, civil rights, reproductive rights, immigrant rights, everything required time, patience, and energy to accomplish. Next slide, please. We have rights and responsibilities granted by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that enable us to engage in this political process, beginning with the most basic of our responsibilities: voting and participating in the election process. Here in New York, as in every other state, election law is written by the state legislature. For many people in America, voting rights have not been easy to come by. We are still fighting to maintain and advance the right to vote in too many places in this country. Next slide, please. So let's turn our attention now to participating in the election process here in New York. We start with creating a voter action plan. We don't just stop with voter registration. We want all New Yorkers to create a voting plan that includes how to register to vote, the important dates you need to be aware of, how to choose your method of voting, how to find your polling place, and how to make decisions on who and what you will be voting for. Next slide, please. These 4 websites are very important resources that we will be sharing to help you find all of the information that I just mentioned. You may want to take a screenshot of this slide for future reference and have your phone ready, and you can navigate to these websites now and save them as bookmarks on your phone. We have the Board of Elections website, which is vote.nyc, and this is your one-stop shop for all the things that I just previously discussed. The Department of Motor Vehicles is also a useful website because you can register to vote through their website, and we will discuss that shortly. The League of Women Voters of NYC and our companion website, Vote 411, are also fantastic resources for you to learn more about what you're voting for, the voting process, and the ballot. And you can also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, you can call the League of Women Voters of New York City to actually talk to someone and understand a little bit more about all of that. Next slide, please. So most fundamentally is step one, which is registering to vote. There are now more ways than ever to do this, which is wonderful. So the first thing to do in your voting action plan is make sure you are registered to vote if you are eligible to vote, and that your registration is current. And when I say current, it means that you're registered at the correct address. In New York City, we move around a lot, so it may be that your address is not current, so you want to make sure that's current, that you're registered under the correct name, and in a political party that you choose for purposes of voting in the primaries. And I'll talk about that more in a moment. So there are presently 3 ways to register to vote in New York. If you have a driver's license or a non-driver ID, you may register and update your registration online through the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV. There's a new law that voter registration is automatic when you register through the DMV, and it's just an opt-out. And it will soon be that way through SUNY schools, public housing, Medicaid, and other New York government agencies that we interact with, but it has not gone into effect yet. So right now, the DMV is your source for that. You can also register online at the New York Board of Elections website, and the website is right there on the screen if you want to screenshot or navigate to it on your phone right now to have it handy. And lastly, you can register using a paper form, which you can download and print out at Vote NYC or the Board of Elections website, as well as our website, the League of Women Voters. So that's pretty easy to access, but it does take some time to print and fill out and then mail back. You can also stop by your Board of Elections office if there's one close to you. That's also another convenient way to pick up the paper form. So that would be the DMV, registering online through the Board of Educations, or registering via a paper form that you either pick up or download. As I mentioned a moment ago, as part of the registration process, you will have the opportunity to select a political party. This allows you to vote in the primaries. This is important because in New York, we are what's called a closed primary state. That means only party members can vote in primaries. In the general election, you don't need to be a party member to vote, and you may vote for anyone you wish to in support of their regardless of their party affiliation. But for the primaries, as I said, we are a closed primary state, so you need to be registered for a political party to vote in the primaries. Next slide, please. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some important upcoming dates. The first one is the deadline to register to vote or postmark your voter registration form. So you can use one of the resources that I just mentioned, whether that's online or the paper form. If you're using the paper form and mailing it, please be sure to postmark it by the deadline. Now, you'll want to get all of the deadlines from either Vote 411 or Board of Elections, but I'll just preview them for you right now. And if you have a pen and paper, you can jot them down. Or again, you can always go to the League website or call the League and we can refresh you on these deadlines. But this year, we have a presidential primary, and that will take place on April 2nd. So you need to be registered to vote by March 23rd if you would like to vote in the primary, if you're choosing a political party. So I'm mentioning that March 23rd deadline because it's right around the corner. The next deadline we have is for non-presidential primaries, which is going to be on June 25th. That is for all of the federal positions that are non-presidential. And you must be registered to vote by June 15th for that. And finally, we have the November 5th general election, and you must be registered by October 26th to vote in that election. So we have depending on where you live and which elections you're voting in, you may have some different deadlines here. So I just wanted to point out those three. For instance, if you lived in upstate New York, you might have you'll have a special election that's also happening later in the spring. I don't know if everyone here is New York City or not, but that's just, I'm mentioning other deadlines that you would want to pay attention. For instance, if your district is having a special election. Now, also, there is a deadline to apply for mail-in ballot by mail. And this is something that's very, very new. In New York, signed in September of 2023, our governor has allowed for early mail-in ballots. You can request a ballot in advance of the election, and it's different than the absentee ballot, but it's the same kind of concept. It gets mailed to you and you can mail it back, so you can vote by mail. There are also early voting deadlines that typically begins about a week and a half before the election. Check to make sure your early voting polling place where that is, because that could be different than the election day polling place. We have election day and other important dates. So again, please be sure to go to the Board of Elections website or the League's website to stay up to date on all of the important deadlines. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit about how to vote. So now you've registered to vote. Now you're ready to go. Here's the next step in the process. There are 3 ways to vote in New York. And there's a new law that I mentioned before that all registered voters can vote by mail-in ballot. There's early voting and there's election day voting. So be sure to keep track of all of those deadlines. Now, as I mentioned, poll sites often change. So what you would want to do is go to Vote NYC, and you can easily put in your address and it'll tell you your polling site, which is where you go to vote, for early voting and for election day voting. So you can have that handy. For instance, my early voting date is a church in Soho, but my election day voting is a public school right around the corner. So just keep track that where you vote early, if you're choosing to vote early, may be different than your typical election day place where you place your ballot. Next slide, please. So the last step in your voting action plan is to make your voting decisions. As we just saw, the Board of Elections is a good place to start. You enter your home address. Just like finding your polling place, you will also be able to enter your address and pull up a sample ballot. And also keep an eye on your mailbox, because sample ballots are also mailed to you before elections, so that if you're like me and like to look at things in print, you can get that out of your mailbox and take a look. And the sample ballot contains the candidates and proposals that you'll be voting on. Remember, we vote for who represents us in our neighborhood, so everyone's ballot is different. If you're over at a friend's house and they have their sample ballot, but they live in a different neighborhood, it might look different than yours. So pay attention to yours so that you can educate yourself on the candidates and proposals in your specific neighborhood. Once you know who and what are on the ballot, you can check out our resource 411, which I've mentioned a couple times, for nonpartisan information about the candidates and issues on the ballot. And you can do your own research through your own trusted resources, but be sure to know if a site is partisan or nonpartisan. And also, candidates' websites will tell you their positions on issues. So there are lots of ways, once you know who and what is on the ballot, for you to educate yourself and feel empowered when you go to cast your vote on your ballot. Next slide, please. Once you have your own plan in place, then you can turn to your community and help others get their voting plan in shape. Getting organized in voter registration drives at local schools, faith organizations, green markets, or anywhere people get together. The League of Women Voters offers training sessions to help you organize voter registration drives. And in fact, there should be a training in April. So if you head to the calendar portion of our website, you can sign up and be trained in how to register others to vote. You can also take a training offered by the Board of Elections to become a poll worker in your community. You complete the application at vote.nyc, and the Board of Elections has a shortage of trained poll workers, and it's a paid position for early voting days and election day. So that is yet another way to help your community. So that covers the first pillar of civic engagement, but not everyone is eligible to vote. So we have two other ways to raise your voice in your community. Next slide, please. The second pillar is lobbying and advocacy. They're slightly different concepts. So once we have our elected officials who represent us, our work is still not done. Now we have the responsibility and the right to respectfully express our opinions on the way our elected officials are governing through the power of advocacy and lobbying. You do not need to be a citizen to participate in lobbying and advocacy. You don't need to be 18 years old. You can raise your voice as a teenager as well. If you are a member of the community, you have a voice. So lobbying is a specific piece of legislation that already exists and that you want to see passed or defeated. This is a very specific way to let your elected official know you would like them to vote on a specific piece of legislation and why that is so important to you and your community. Advocacy, on the other hand, involves reaching out to the appropriate elected officials to express our concern about issues. This is a way to let your elected officials know how you feel about a concern like gun violence, noise pollution, or affordable housing. This may lead them to support legislation when it comes up, or even write their own bill to address this concern. Next slide, please. To exercise our rights to express an opinion on an issue, it is really important to know who to turn to. How do we know who is responsible for which issue or concern that we care about? If my concern is a national issue, like healthcare, foreign policy, or the internet, then I need to focus my energy on action directed at my federal level officials, my congressperson, senators, and the president. If my concerns are related to state issues like education, criminal justice, and election reform, for example, I need to seek out my state elected officials, my state assembly person, state senator, and the governor. But if my concerns are local, like libraries, traffic, urban development, green spaces, and recreation, and other quality of life issues, then I need to turn to my elected officials, who would be city council, borough president, mayor, public advocate, or controller. Your voice can be heard much louder on these local issues since your city council person is also your neighbor and must live in your district. So let's take a closer look at New York City so we can amplify our voices for greater impact and understand why voting and participating locally is so crucial. You can find out who represents you at all three levels, as you see on the screen, federal, state, and local, by entering your address into the League website, Who Represents Me, and that's mygovnyc.org. Next slide, please. So how does New York City run? The citywide elected officials that you can look up on the Who Represents Me are responsible for the overall governance of the entire city. The mayor acts as the chief of the city. The comptroller is responsible for the city's finances, and the public advocate advocates for the public. He or she magnifies the voice of the people. NYC 311, and you can see the address for it down there, or you can call on your phone, is a hub of city information. If you want to find out which city agency handles your concern, or what the mayor is up to, or when even your trash is going to be collected, go to 311. You can also register complaints about city services there, and the portal is right there, and you can report a problem if necessary. Next slide, please. Now we go to borough-wide elected officials. These are the city council and the borough president. The borough president oversees the interests of the entire borough in terms of land use, funding, and other concerns. The city council is the legislative body of New York City. They write laws and also amend the city charter with voter approval. Your city council person's website, which you can access through Who Represents Me, which I mentioned before, will help you find out what your council person is working on right now. It will tell you the committees they serve on, and if you click through, you can even see the bills that he or she is considering right now. You can follow the bill. You can even sign up for alerts to your email address to get alerts on the bill. Each local law can only cover one subject in New York City, so that makes it a bit easier to check out what's being considered. Next slide, please. Knowing how all this works is the first step to making your voice heard. You don't just have to follow a piece of legislation as it winds through the process. You can affect the outcome in many ways. You can write letters, call your representatives' offices, or send emails to your elected officials expressing your opinion on a piece of legislation or an issue. Elected officials keep a tally of the number of people who reach out to them. They have a tipping point that registers on their radar when they start to pay attention. So please be sure to use your voice by writing letters, calling their office, or sending emails on specific issues that concern you. You can also attend meetings of committees or organizations who are working on the issues that concern you. The council meetings are always open to the public, so you can find out where and when they are on the city council's website and attend. You can testify at a meeting. Often council members want to hear how a particular piece of legislation will affect a community. Recently, we saw many of the congestion pricing meetings online, and people were able to voice their opinions for and against that piece of legislation. So stand up and be heard. Next slide, please. There are additional ways to make an impact, including engaging in participatory budgeting. Participatory budgeting is a citywide initiative to engage community members in improving their neighborhoods. You get to vote on where certain funds go. It's really neat to read about initiatives in your community and then vote and see those initiatives receive money in the budget. So be sure to look out for participatory budgeting in your area. Community board members are the most grassroots element of the city government. These people are volunteers who are recommended by the city council members whose districts overlap the community board districts and are appointed by the borough president. They monitor delivery of city services such as sanitation and street maintenance. They are involved in planning and review of land use, and they make recommendations for the budget. Community boards meet regularly, and all of their meetings are open to the public. You can sign up to receive updates and information about your community board's work through your borough's president website. You can also volunteer to serve on your community board. So participatory budgeting and community boards are two great ways to interact and participate in local representative bodies. Next slide, please. And there are many more ways to get involved in your community, even if you are not eligible to vote. There are non-governmental organizations that you can get involved with. Join a local community group working in your neighborhood, such as the League of Women Voters, parent-teacher organization, political clubs, civic clubs, food pantries, or a number of groups in your area. You can participate in demonstrations or marches and events sponsored by organizations you trust, or start your own group. through either an organization you're already a member of or fresh for yourself. You can write letters, post on social media, volunteer for political campaigns, and become a leader in your community. Next slide, please. So this is a great slide to take a screenshot of because you can do these things right now to access your power to influence the direction of this city. So take a minute to either screenshot or take a mental note of the things listed here. These are all things that you can do in your community to take action and have your voice be heard. And maybe make some goals for yourself. Maybe an immediate goal is to register to vote and make an action plan. And your 3-month goal is to attend a community board meeting. And your 6-month goal is to learn a little bit more about your city council person and the positions he or she is taking. Next slide, please. In New York City, the League provides timely information to New York City voters. In order to do this, we manage a telephone information service to answer questions from voters during the election season. So always feel free to call us with your questions. We're happy to help you. We publish information and material to keep voters updated. Our website is a wealth of knowledge and information. We host candidate debates and forums, and we provide speakers to share information with community groups, corporations, and schools, and people just like you. So we are always welcoming new members, volunteers, and supporters to help us with our important work. And in fact, this Friday will be at the New York Historical Society, registering people to vote and making sure their voter registration is current. So if registering to vote or making your registration current is on your checklist, come by and see us this Friday night at the New York Historical Society from 6 to 8 p.m. We'd love to see you and talk about how you can make your voice louder in your community. Next slide, please. I want to thank you for attending tonight's presentation and allowing me to share all of this important information with you. I'd like to close with a quote from John Lewis, the late civil rights activist and congressman, who said, "Freedom is not a state, it is an act. It is not some enchanted garden perched high on a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is the continuous action we must all take, and each generation must do its part to create an even more fair, more just society." I hope this presentation has inspired you to go out and take action in your community to make New York City, New York State, and the entire country a better place for all of us. I'm happy to take any questions from the participants. I did not monitor the chat, so there might already be some in there, but we have plenty of time. Oh, looks like we don't have anything in the chat. So if you would like to ask any questions, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. And I'm also going to share actually in the chat my League email address. And you can always email me with any questions, ways to get involved. Oh, I see we do have one question, so I'll address that as I type my email in. How might one get involved in voter registration drives? That's a great question, Renee. If you would like to host a voter registration drive, and by host, I mean help others register to vote, please come to the League website, which I will also put in the chat. You can sign up for any of our voter registration drives that we do. For instance, just today, we had one at a high school on the Upper East Side, and we had volunteers. One volunteer made a presentation like this, and other volunteers helped students register to vote. We go to libraries, we go to all sorts of locations. And so you can go through us, and there's other organizations out there too, but the league would love to have you as a volunteer if you want to get involved. And I'm gonna, as I said, and just putting my email in the chat for everyone, and you can email me directly, and I'd be happy to speak with you or email with you about opportunities to get involved with the league. I mentioned there is going to be a training in April. We haven't pinned down the date and time yet, but it will be mid-April. And that will teach you a little bit about the ins and outs of the voter registration forms, so that when people coming to register have questions, you have a wealth of knowledge about that. But they're pretty straightforward. And so, Renee, I hope that answers your question. But if you need more information, feel free to put it in the chat, unmute yourself, or just email me. Do we have any other questions? Anything any would like to share? We have plenty of time, and I don't want to cut this off prematurely, because I'm happy to go over anything that people might have on their minds. Susan, what's a good avenue to get involved with lobbying for an issue? Yeah, that's a great question, Susan. So I think when you first identify the issue, you want to understand which of your elected officials might be involved with that specific issue, or bring it to their attention, which is part of lobbying, right? So sometimes, trying to think of an example from my own life. I know a few years ago, I was emailing my elected officials about the tax on feminine care products. And there was a bill being sponsored by another elected official. And I said, please support that bill. And I put the exact bill in the subject line of the email. If you go to the contact us section of your elected official's website, it's pretty easy to find. And I said, when this comes up for a vote on the floor, please vote for this. I am your constituent, and this is an important issue for me. So that's a tiny way to lobby, right? You can also, Susan, get involved with bigger organizations that lobby for different causes. And I hate to refer to this, but Google might be one of the best ways to find those organizations, because there'll be a host of issues that different organizations lobby for. But if you're looking to support or not support a specific piece of legislation, I would search through and find that legislation and implore your elected officials to act on it. And Susan, just feel free to chat or ask for an unmute if you want to further engage on that. But that's my advice there. Justin is asking if you can be arrested. Is it from voting or before voting? Justin, you cannot be arrested for voting. If you are eligible to vote, you are allowed to vote. And we always tell people to stay online, and you are allowed to vote. So no, you shouldn't be arrested if you're trying to vote or if you're trying to register to vote. You know, I mentioned before that people face challenges in New York and other states too for voting, for just trying to vote. I'm an attorney by trade, and part of my pro bono work is supporting access to voting on the legal side of things. For the league, it's more volunteer, and I man phone lines that you would be so surprised to hear the stories of what people encounter when they're trying to vote. People telling them the poll is closed, people telling them they have to watch an informational video in order to be eligible for voting. So there are a lot of things out there that are preventing people from voting that are not appropriate. So Justin, no, you should not be arrested for trying to vote or trying to register to vote. Okay. I'll keep the line open for about another minute if anyone has any questions. Again, just trying to, Okay, I didn't know if you were raising your hand, Justin, but that's a clapping signal. So yeah. And if Justin, if you do encounter any problems, you may want to advise your local official. I had that last year. Actually, somebody that I worked with, he was told by a poll worker that he was not eligible to vote, and he immediately reported it to his elected official, also went to court and was found to be eligible to vote and voted. So, you know, unfortunately, sometimes we have to really fight for rights that should be, that have already been given to us. Also from Susan, is it possible to learn where voters may run into problems like the one you mentioned as to work as an observer or a poll worker? Yeah, so you can go to the Board of Elections. Susan, if you live in New York, you can go to the Board of Elections website and sign up to be or apply to be a poll worker. And, you know, we always can use poll workers. An observer, the League of, I'm not sure about that specifically in terms of becoming an observer and which organizations do observation, but that's a very noble way to volunteer. Renee, if you feel comfortable putting or sending your email to me, I can look that up and send you an email on it. I'm just not sure off the top of my head organizations that do observing specific to where you may live or want to be. Justin, what gets youth excited about voting? Well, this is this is an age-old question that I've been trying to answer with my colleagues, right? I think what gets them excited about voting is issues that are important to them. And I know that sounds a bit cliche, but I think sometimes we, especially, you know, when we are watching the news, we see all of the really big issues, and those affect our daily lives. They certainly do. But I think when if we can get our youth to engage in issues that affect their daily life, maybe it's fair pay for the public school teachers that they know and love. Maybe it's you know, pollution or trash on their street. There's all sorts of things that are really important to them that get them engaged in community. And you know, we hope that voting will come along with that. And we hope that people, you know, see voting as a way to achieve you know, sharing their voice in their community, but getting them excited about voting. I think there's so many different ways. And I think sometimes people feel that voting, oh, my vote doesn't really count, or it's not really heard, or, you know, I'm just one of so many people voting, does it move the needle? And it really, really does. And one example I use is that in New York, for example, we vote for our judges. Now in New Jersey, just across the river, judges are appointed. But in New York, we vote for our judges, and our judges interpret the law. So whether it's civil law or criminal law, those are the people that interpret the law. And that's a really, really important position to be in. And so we should consciously and with background knowledge vote for these people. So I think sometimes pointing out, Justin, to them the way their votes actually play out in society is helpful. And showing them that it's just one of, as we talked about, 3 different ways for them to raise their voice in their community. But if anyone else on this call has ideas, I'm always open to it. Hearing how you yourself have engaged youth. As I mentioned today, we were in a high school registering voters, and all of the students were super excited about it. So I'm hoping that this generation coming up is the excitement's in their DNA, and we don't have to encourage them. Okay, well, seeing no other questions, my email, if you scroll up, it's up there. Yep. My email is in the chat. Feel free to email me. It does sometimes take me a day or two to get back to you, but I will get back to you. And we'd love for you to get involved with the league. Again, it's nonpartisan. And so it's a really great source for information, but also for volunteering and getting out in your community. So we'd love to have you as a member or as a volunteer or both. You know, I would hope we get to see each other at one of the league events. So, Justin, it's not just for women. It's not just for women. We have male volunteers and members. It was started by women, and that hence the name, but we are happy to have people of all genders, all abilities. We're a very inclusive organization, and we would love to have you, Justin, and anyone else on today's call. Okay, with that, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank Janae, our lovely tech person who helped us through the presentation today. And so thank you, Janae, for helping me with my slides. And again, I can't emphasize enough, please email me. I'd be happy to speak with you about ways to get involved. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. I hope you get to enjoy some of this spring weather. I hope it's not premature, but and that this warmer weather is here to last. So thanks again, and have a wonderful evening.